Okay, welcome to lesson 2. So let's talk about some inputs on oscillators and how we would combine them. Now, a caveat for this is, the last lesson was sort of like case, power, oscillator, just one. Now, if we go case, power, oscillator, that gives us some ways to combine things and make some other stuff happen. It doesn't necessarily need to be an oscillator, but it does help because these are the most flexible part of the Eurorack. Is like, we have LFOs and audible audio rate oscillators contained within this. And eventually we'll talk about complex oscillators where it's even more advanced in terms of how you can combine things. So let's talk about pulse width modulation. So remember, pulse width relates to the square wave. Pulse width modulation basically means we're turning this knob automatically in some way. So we're going to make that happen. And different rates make different things happen. So what I'm going to do is plug in a sine wave from one oscillator into the pulse width modulation of the other. And how fast this goes, you'll hear, has a big influence. Something also to consider is that this particular oscillator has an attenuator on it, and most of them seem to have that. Not everything, but most of them seem to have some kind of knob here that says how much pulse width modulation do I want. If you don't have that, you are probably going to need to put a VCA in between, and we will talk about VCAs very shortly. So let's start with the square wave. Add pulse width. So you can hear that, how fast this oscillator is going. Right now, this is running at LFO rate, so it's so low that you can't hear it, but it is moving things around. And you can go, into crazy town, into audio rate, and make it do that. This is generally a trick that's used with basses, so what I like to do is put the sub and the square wave together. So it's pretty cool, and same thing. We add a guitar pedal reverb, and all of a sudden we've got drone music. So pretty cool. So that's pulse width modulation. We're just, automating some knob movement. Now let's talk about FM, because this is where things get very interesting. So it's easier to learn about FM from sines because it gets a little more straightforward at first. So I've got my sine wave signal. I'm just going to take another sine wave and plug it into FM. And that's sort of your basic FM. Most oscillators will have an exponential and a linear switch, or they'll have separate inputs. They'll be like an exponential input and a linear input. So what this means is, I'm combining sine waves, and what this is doing is this is my main pitch, and this is adding harmonics. Unless you go below the pitch, and then it's adding, you'll hear it. It's adding that, so it's like moving it slower, and you're actually hearing the pitch change. And you can hear a lot lot happens based on that. I'm in exponential mode. Linear mode is less extreme sounding. So you can hear that, this is maybe a little more pleasant to your ears, I guess. Now, this is where it gets interesting is, normally FM is made by connecting sine waves together, but because it's Eurorack, we can connect all kinds of stuff together that, wasn't maybe intended at first, but we have the options, so we can experiment with this stuff. So I can combine square waves, I can combine a saw and a square, I can combine a triangle and a whatever, right? So I don't want to limit your thinking here. Like, combine anything you want and see what it sounds like. It might be good, it might be crazy, but it might be cool. Another thing to think about is, like, we talked about in the first lesson, certain oscillators have rhythm inherent to them because they have sharp attacks. So like a saw and a square. So if I take anything out of the first oscillator and the second one I take a square, all of a sudden we can introduce a rhythmic element if we lower the pitch enough. The interesting thing here too is you're hearing that this isn't a perfect square wave, because you kind of hear the pitches moving a little bit. Okay, so what do we use this for? I don't know. I found uses for it, though, in different film scores, especially if you bury it in reverb and delay. You get lots of options. So I'm going to turn on my guitar pedal. All of a sudden we've got something pretty musical happening there. If we get our pitches set right, this is sort of a lower pitch on the original, that's really low. And this is controlling the speed of the rhythm on this side, because, our rhythm is coming from the pulse here. Also, pulse width modulation. If we change the pulse width, we can change the rhythm. We can build it into something else entirely. When we start combining, more unusual combinations, we get all kinds of stuff happening. So there's more rhythm there. Okay, so we just learned FM without getting way into the math of FM. All it means is we're taking the pitch of one oscillator and using it to change the pitch of another oscillator. It doesn't have to be two oscillators. It can be lots of different things, but FM is just changing the pitch. So I hope this gives you some ideas to play with, and I hope you plug oscillators together and just try them out, because we made a lot of sound with just two simple devices.